This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. I hope you'll forgive me as I'm going to read, and I won't be staring directly at you for the moment. And this is something that I put together, books for the college-bound black man. Hello, I mentor a young black man who's going to college next year, and I wonder if you had a list of literature or suggestions for some reading material. He's interested in economics and business. I was hoping for some ethics, philosophy, and history titles as well. I would prefer if the authors were black. He attends a majority-white private Catholic school where he is one of the brightest students. I want him to have some black intellectual experience too. Thank you for your time. And I respond to this letter. Well, it helps to be a voracious reader no matter what your field of study. It's only with that kind of appetite that you get to the good stuff. There's a deceptively large amount of good stuff out there. I say large because any good 20 books is quite enough reading to set one straight permanently. This is deceptive because if the books don't click with you, or you wind up with the wrong picks, you could go for years until you get the books that carry you forward. So onto the list and some personal context. I too attended a white private Catholic high school, and I'm sure mine was better than his. Oops, that slipped. But, we cubbies like to trip sometimes. I read Roots when I was a junior in high school, but it did nothing for me like The Man Who Lived Underground. There's something very important in getting to the right black literature that can change your mind forever, because it's very easy to fall into a trap of ghettoizing black literature based on 3 or 4 popular but weak books. And it wasn't until I read, or tried to read, Leroy Jones' Blues People that I even accepted the idea that blacks wrote scholarly books at the age of 16 or 17. I'd always grown up around so many people who quoted Maya Angelou and Ntozake Shange that as if they possessed all the black knowledge there was. So I think the most important thing is to handle the existentials first. You got to be able to click with somebody who lets you know that you're not alone as you think you are, being somewhat exceptional in altogether different potential direction than method and read. So what I'm saying is that in the empirical fields, your coursework will allow you, will be enough to know. I mean, mastery is mastery. Either you got it or you don't. And there isn't much new what from the black perspective outside of Sowell and Williams, but there's a good deal of how. How as a black like me, that is answered in black literature, without which you can't really empower yourself to be quite well-adjusted human being, as such demanding courses require. Sheer brain power is not a triumph. You got to be smart too. The Existentials. First book. Marcus Mabry, White Bucks and Black-Eyed Peas. I found a recent photo of Mabry as well as his bio at Newsweek. I'm stunned. There seemed in this young man, when I read his book a dozen years ago, nothing but a kind of sentimental, soft, clumsy geekiness, greatly out of context for the man that he appears to be. I actually felt sorry for the guy, and that was very harsh. I was a black poet, as likely to be, when I read about his trials and tribulations at Stanford. I have since come to believe that he's Republican, and have considered rereading his book. Mabry needs rethinking for me, but I think he provides an excellent example of how that nebulous and aimless feel as an undergraduate inevitably gives way to a kind of conviction and purpose we all eventually acquire. Second book, Brent Staples, Parallel Time. I find much to admire in Staples' tale. Here's a man with a goodly amount of cheek and backbone who took on the University of Chicago with gusto. He faced multiple worlds presented to him admirably and sensitively. I see him as a playful master in his environments, reflective and confident. He embodied a kind of black man spirit that one might tend to believe does not exist in truly intellectual types. And if I have been a harsh of John McWhorter, part of that owes to the context of Brent Staples. If you only know those blacks that are presented as intellectuals through the popular media, you miss. And quite frankly, if there was only 10,000 of us in this nation, chances are you won't see or recognize us in public. Third book, Paul Beatty, The White Boy Shuffle. People who read this book called me on the telephone and tell me they swore that I wrote it under a pseudonym, and when I read it, I couldn't believe it myself. Beatty is completely off the chain, and is led around by his brain bouncing off of walls of joy and pain. Book number 4, High Cotton by Daryl Pinckney. Although people who knew me as a youth mostly identified me with Beatty, Pinckney understands who I feel like I am inside. This is the one book that I think comes closest to my soul. I can't know what it might mean for other folks, but this particular book means a great deal to me. Book 5, Colored People by Skip Gates. Good book, nice read, very old school. And now, the philosophicals. Book 1, Cornel West, The American Invasion of Philosophy. No matter what's said about Cornel West, he did write this book. And a lot of people mouth off about Judeo-Christian values, but really, to understand what's going on in the core thinking that made America great, you have to read this. Now, it's true that West is a lefty and he has that kind of style to it, but these are important thinkers that you got to know one way or another. This is an indispensable introduction and survey of great public thinkers who have led the American to school, as distinct from the European. If you read nothing else, read this one. It ain't easy, but it's worth it. Charles Johnson. There's a lot of Charles Johnson to read, so I'm not recommending any particular book, but Middle Passage is probably his best work. Also, The Ox-Herding Tale. Very logical, very playful, and working on multiple levels. Lovely bunch of good stuff there. Ishmael Reed, Japanese by Spring. Everything you need to know about the fallacies and foibles of multiculturalism wrapped in with a wit that will send you whimpering into a corner trying to catch your breath from laughing your ass off. Don't go to college without this book. Candide by Voltaire. I read this one too late for it to make a difference for me, but it's quick, it's an easy read, and it's a must. Malcolm X Speaks. Really, everything you need to know about Malcolm X is distilled and captured in his speeches. I read this one from cover to cover in a short period of time, and it completely changed my estimation of the man, his times, and his accomplishments. If you ask me, it's all there. Michael Eric Dyson makes the trenchant point that for all of his threat and bluster, Malcolm never took his Fruit of Islam down to the South to butt heads with the Klan. Was Malcolm a coward? Who knows? But what you can know is how electrifying and thoughtful he was in his response to the challenges of his day. You should know also that many Indians I know compare him to a guy named Subhas Bose. Don't forget that. Finally, Cain by Jean Toomer. How does a civilized man live alone in a wilderness of anonymity? How do you keep the engines of intellect running in your head when you're surrounded by people who have no idea?
Database has been updated.
Oh, shut up. Christ. How do you keep the engines of intellect running when you get stupid messages popping up on your thing? But when you're surrounded by people who have no idea of the skills you possess or the depth of your soul or humanity. Toomer has a character named Cadmus. Speaks to me. Great literature. So, those are my recommendations. Read on. Peace.